Balquhidder is an ancient glen, with its first settlers arriving over 3,000 years ago. St. Angus first arrived here around 580 AD to bring Christianity to the area. The little church holds some interesting artefacts and is usually always open. In the graveyard lies the most famous inhabitant of this area, Rob Roy MacGregor, the great Highland hero, buried alongside his wife and 2 of his 5 sons. Involved in the battles of Killiecrankie and Sheriff Muir, the 1715 Jacobite rebellion, at least 22 personal duels and many battles and skirmishes with government troops and antagonists, he became a legend in his own lifetime, and his great skill as a cattle dealer helped to feed, clothe and protect his clan. It's claimed that the Mafia adopted their system of blackmail from Rob Roy. In those times when wealth was measured in cattle, as most Highland cattle were black in colour and the term for rent was male, Rob offered farmers and landowners a cattle protection system levied on the amount of annual rent they paid and the numbers of cattle they possessed, hence the term blackmail. Although his life was full of confrontation and never-ending incidents, he strangely enough died peacefully in his bed. On hearing that his old foe was on his deathbed, a neighbouring MacLaren came to pay his last respects. Although dying, Rob demanded of his wife that she dress him with his plaid, dirk and pistol before allowing the MacLaren to enter. As soon as his guest had left, Rob turned to Mary and said, "It is all over. Put me to bed and call my piper." As the piper played Rob's favourite lament, "I shall return no more," he passed away peacefully. Many chieftains and clansmen from all over the Highlands attended the funeral on New Year's Day 1735. The clan piper sounded out the arrival of the procession as it sailed down Loch Voil. Rob's gravestone is an ancient Celtic slab which had been carved some 400 years earlier, no doubt obtained by Rob or his sons from some long-forgotten place. The Carnegie family, wealthy Gothenburg brewers, bought and developed a large estate in the glen they named Stranvar, and commissioned famous Scottish architect David Bryce to remodel Stranvar House. His work can also be seen at Lenny House, Callander, and set about much building in the glen to house and educate his workers, including the library. Magnificent all-night balls would be held for the village in the big house, still remembered to this day, with old James Carnegie in his 70s, with his wife, nurse, cushions and rugs, watching the dancing and retiring at the stroke of midnight, when the party would explode with dancing and singing, until the first train at 8 o'clock the next morning, which the band would board. He died in 1925 and was for a while survived by his redoubtable widow, who died in her 92nd year. Many years earlier, in 1745, 2 young Carnegie brothers fought on opposite sides during the Battle of Culloden. The youngest brother, George, was on the prince's side and escaped to sea and was later rescued by a Swedish vessel which arrived in Gothenburg, where he founded the family business. The glen was also home to a number of clans. The MacLarens were the oldest inhabitants and were joined later by the MacGregors, Stuarts and Fergusons. All these clans were loyal to the royal house of Stuart, and many had their homes and lands laid waste after the Battle of Culloden, which ended the '45 Jacobite rebellion and was the beginning of the end of the Highland way of life. One Donald MacLaren, who had been captured and was being taken by a troop of redcoats to prison in Carlisle, escaped and returned to Balquhidder disguised as a woman, and lived as that for 2 years, when all rebels still alive were pardoned. One Jacobite to fare worse was Dr. Archibald Cameron, whose brother, Cameron of Lochiel, had died in exile in France. Dr. Cameron was the last victim of the '45 and was caught in the hills between Balquhidder and Loch Katrine. He had escaped with the prince and his brother to France, but returned, and was on the 7th of June 1753 hung, drawn and quartered, the last such person to suffer such an end. In fact, he died on the gallows and was quite dead before the rest of the sentence was carried out. He was 46 and regarded as a gentle, caring doctor who tended the wounded of both sides during the conflict. And to suffer such a severe punishment a full 7 years after the '45 outraged Scotland at the time. One of the most popular walks in the area is the Kirkton Pass, a 6.5-mile walk from Balquhidder to Glendochart. An interesting tale surrounds this walk. A spectral hunter accompanied by 2 deerhounds has been seen on a number of occasions by walkers on this route, not least by 2 Nature Conservancy Council scientists who stated that they thought he was a poacher. So they decided a pincer movement was the best method of capture, only to find that he had disappeared into thin air. The traditional gathering place of the Clan MacLaren at Craig-an-Turk is at the start of this walk, a short and memorable path leading to an outstanding view of the braes. This beautiful countryside is the most southerly range of the Golden Eagle. For sheer majesty, there's none to compare to this magnificent bird of prey, with a 7-foot wingspan and capable of speeds of over 90 miles an hour. They mate for life, and occasionally a pair may be spotted high above the mountains in effortless flight. An ancient Scottish folk tale tells of an eagle swooping down and taking an infant from cornfields as its mother worked. It was said the mother heard the cries of her child as the bird glided high in the sky with its prey wriggling in its talons, and sadly lost both her baby and her mind, for the crying never ceased thereafter. A spectacular drive is on to the end of the glen on a twisty single-track road which runs along the shore of Loch Voil to Monaghan Moor. It was over the loch directly opposite here that in 1691 a young 21-year-old Rob Roy took a tenancy of the farm Monaghan Tuarach from the Marquis of Atholl. Continue on, and the views only get better as you enter the open hills, and not far from the end of the road is the farm of Inverloch Larrig, where Rob Roy spent his final days and died peacefully. The Braes of Balquhidder was the setting for 2 of Robert Louis Stevenson's best novels, Kidnapped and Catriona, and Wordsworth penned his famous poem The Solitary Reaper after a walk down Balquhidder Glen. Another of his famous poems was Rob Roy. A couple of miles on, you may wish to take another interesting short circular detour around Loch Earn. The loch is said to derive its name from the sea eagle, which became extinct but was reintroduced onto the island of Rum and is occasionally seen on the west coast on Loch Fyne and Long, but not this far east. This route starts at the South Loch Earn Road. You'll pass a restored castle, once a Campbell of Breadalbin stronghold and now under Spanish ownership. Follow the loch side on a pretty single-track road past Ardvorlich House, a private big house owned by the Stuarts who have held this land for centuries. A stone marks the spot where 7 MacDonalds of Glencoe were buried after raiding the estate in 1620. A number of years earlier, the laird was married to the daughter of the keeper of the royal forest, who had cut off the ears of some MacGregor poachers. The clan took revenge, beheading the keeper and arriving at Ardvorlich asking for hospitality. When the lady of the house served them bread and cheese, she left the room, only to return and find her father's severed head on the table, its mouth stuffed with the food. She was pregnant at the time, and in shock fled up the hill to a lochan and gave birth to a son. The lochan is called Woman's Loch. The son became a staff officer for the Marquis of Montrose and murdered Loch Kilpont in a brawl during the 1645 Scottish Wars of the Covenant. The road passes St Fillan's Golf Club and goes over a bridge to the village of St Fillan's.